Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Man's Way Through the 12 Steps by Dan Griffin, M.A. Narrated by Chris Sorensen. Preface. In 1995, at the age of 23, I was just over a year sober, and my father had just died from complications due to chronic alcoholism. At the wake, some men from my father's AA meetings invited me to attend a recovery retreat, even paying for my airfare and registration. The disappointment started as soon as the men picked me up. One of the men immediately started complaining about his wife, and then told a derogatory joke about women. Laughter filled the car like smoke, and I laughed too, though hesitantly. The conversation went on to span relationships, sports, recovery, from the mundane to profane to the inane. As we arrived at the retreat center, I could see water from a small lake in the distance, with tall trees quietly swaying back and forth, welcoming us and promising solitude. Shortly after we arrived, one of the men told an offensive and racist joke. This time I did not laugh. Walking away down toward the water, I thought to myself, is this the best we can do as men? Is this what I have to look forward to in my relationships with men in recovery? That day I made a commitment to myself that I would not cheapen my recovery by compromising my values just so that I could fit in. Easier said than done. The path to who we can become is rocky and full of mistakes. But recovery offers us the opportunity to learn from those mistakes, to grow, and to change how we live. When we need guidance on our path, we learn to look to others in recovery for help. Those who actively work the 12 steps know that when we challenge each other according to the principles of the program, we support each other in becoming the best that we can be. As a man listening to this book, you will ask questions about who you have been, who you are, and who you will become in recovery, and you will find that the answers are embodied in the principles of the 12 steps. You will hear that some of what you have been told, learned, and even thought about men has been inaccurate. You will also see that there is no greater resource than the steps to help affirm what is best about our masculinity and about being men. What we are experiencing in the 12-step culture is much bigger than the very personal transformation that we experience and witness in others. Every time we take a risk and share honestly from our hearts, we create an opportunity for others to do the same and transform how men live as men, one man at a time. Introduction. Regardless of your background and previous experiences, when you come into treatment or a 12-step program, you immediately experience a culture in which people communicate. You too are asked, even expected, to communicate in ways with which you, as a man, are probably neither familiar nor comfortable. Thus begins the most exciting and rewarding journey you will ever take on this earth, a man's journey through the 12 steps. This book is written to all men in 12-step recovery. The we and the you I speak to in this book are all of us men charting the courses of our lives by the shining light of the 12 steps. Many of us have never thought about what being a man has to do with our recovery. Unlike our female counterparts, we have not spent the last 20 years looking at what we need, taking care of ourselves, and learning to live full lives. Even the 12-step community has been reluctant to discuss the freedom of expression for men inherent in the philosophy of the 12 steps. Many still assume that men are the way they are, and they don't see the pain, struggles, and limitations of men suffocating in the box of masculinity as it's been defined by our society. So it is that a man's way through the 12 steps has some history in the women's movement, a time when women began to look at their lives and the effect society's rules had on how they were raised. Because of that important and historical work, Women today have a deeper and clearer sense of what it means to be female and how social messages have limited and restricted them. The concept of gender and the socially created roles for males and females have evolved. The rules and expectations for men have changed. Today, it's easier to recognize how the ways we are raised create limitations for both men and women. A man's way also has its history in the men's movement. When women began looking at their lives through the lens of gender, some courageous men concluded that we needed to do the same. Far less work has been done on the impact of gender on men's lives, particularly in relation to addiction and recovery. This book helps to fill that void. A Man's Way is about creating gender awareness for men in recovery. It will help you look more closely at the realities of your life and address and respond to the challenges we face as men in Western society. Who am I? When you ask that question at the beginning of your recovery journey, you are probably able to say with total honesty, "I don't know." What does it mean to be a man? As a man, you may accept certain ways of thinking, talking, and acting as just who you are. You probably don't see that our culture has a set of rules for being a man. You may not realize you are following a kind of script. You put on your costume and act out the script. Your addiction to drugs, gambling, sex, rage, or relationships are part of the fabric of your costume that allows you to hide your true self. This book is meant in part to be a wake-up call. My hope is that as a result of listening to this book, you will think about your ideas of what it means to be a man and about your life as a man in recovery. A Man's Way will not address all of the challenges and issues men face today, but it will help you confront the changes you need to make in your life. You will find parts of yourself that you had long forgotten, had tried to get away from, and that you never knew existed. Throughout the book, I will look at how men are raised. Some of these discussions will apply to you, and some will not. However, my hope is that you will begin to form better ideas of who you are as a man. How you see yourself as a man affects how you see the steps, how you engage in your recovery, and what you see as problems. These perceptions also can limit how much you grow in your recovery, especially in your relationships with other men and women. A Man's Way has the book A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps as a core part of its foundation. In this groundbreaking book, Dr. Stephanie Covington looked at the 12 steps and their impact on women's lives. She was able to stay true to the principles in the 12 steps while broadening the canvas upon which women paint their recovery. I have attempted to do the same for men by borrowing her model of using interviews and discussions of each step to help you better understand how each step relates to your life and to the lives of men in general. As men in recovery, we have addiction and the destruction it has caused in common. We also share a common solution, the 12 steps. With every step we take toward loving ourselves and shedding parts of our costume, we begin to see the limitless possibilities for who we can be and how we can live our lives. With that vision comes the freedom to be who we are, regardless of society's box of masculinity. By being true to ourselves, we automatically become the best men we can be. I begin this book by looking at what is often one of the most difficult issues men have to deal with in sobriety, recognizing and expressing our feelings. How we come to terms with our emotions has a big impact on how effectively we are able to work a 12-step program. I then explored each step with a focus on the unique cultural, social, and personal challenges and perspectives that men bring to understanding and applying that step in their lives. Finally, I cover 4 topics: grief, relationships, violence and trauma, and difference that deserve their own chapters because of their complexity and how vital they are for men in achieving quality long-term sobriety. Throughout the book, you will discover stories from others who have been on this journey for some time. Draw on their insights and experiences to find the strength and hope to carry you through difficult moments. Explore the many questions raised in the discussions and envision the limitless options available to us as men. I hope that as you listen to this book, you will look deeply at who you are and the life you want to live. Take what you want and leave the rest. As my first sponsor always told me, misery is optional. Feelings. I came into recovery with the mindset that you have to deny all feelings. Feelings were the enemy. Peter. Shortly after my father's funeral, I was helping my mom clean the house when I found some notes my father had written while in treatment. As I looked through them, I realized that he didn't think anybody could help him, felt alone a lot of the time, and didn't think he could talk to anyone. I had not known that he had those struggles or that he felt lonely, insecure, or fearful. He always acted as though everything was under control and that he didn't need anything from anyone. He always seemed quite self-assured. Something led my father to believe that the only way he could survive those feelings was to drink them away. He was not going to open up about them, even if shutting down killed him. And it did. Tragically, far too many men are walking the same path. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. It's the unwritten code by which many men live their lives. The most compelling responses I received from the men I interviewed focused on how recovery has given them awareness of the many feelings they actually had and the ability to accept, appreciate, and, most important, communicate the degree to which, as men, they experience the range of human emotion. If men who are not addicts ignore their feelings, they miss the fullness of life and close the door on an essential part of who they are. We addicts ignore our feelings at our own peril. Being aware of how we feel is a matter of life or death for us. Our feelings are both essential parts of who we are as men and the foundation of our recovery, and this chapter explores how we are raised to accept and reject our feelings. Burying the caveman. If feelings are a core part of the human experience, then they must be a core part of our recovery too. I have yet to meet a man who does not feel the whole range of emotions. I have yet to meet a man who grew up knowing how to express what he was feeling, when he was feeling it, and without allowing those feelings to mean anything about his masculinity. Andy, a 58-year-old IT consultant with 26 years in Al-Anon, talked about this. All men have feelings, whether or not they want to admit it. I came into the program not knowing how to name what I was feeling. Now, after years of practice, I can name them and experience and acknowledge all the feelings that I have, whether or not they are manly. Joe H., a 42-year-old with 5 years of sobriety who owns his own insurance agency, talked about the paradox regarding men and our experience of emotion. I am emotionally complex like I believed only women were. I found that I saw them this way because they were the only gender I saw expressing themselves emotionally. So long as we perpetuate the lie that men do not have feelings, we will believe this to be true, because, as Joe H. said, we will only see women expressing their feelings. Whether or not we are aware of our feelings, we do have them. Dave, a 42-year-old stay-at-home dad with 21 years of long-term recovery, described his experience. In my youth, emotions ruled my decisions. I couldn't necessarily articulate my feelings surrounding specific decisions, but their rule over me was undeniable. Few of us come into recovery knowing how to open up and share what is happening in our lives. It's our task as men to learn how to integrate our feelings into our lives in a meaningful and helpful way. Joe H. verbalizes what many men experience as they come into recovery. Prior to recovery, I did not have practice in expressing how I felt, nor did I know how to recognize how I felt. Usually, when I did express myself, it was using anger as a result of all the other emotions not being expressed. One of the many lies we tell about ourselves on a daily basis is connected with how we feel. We learn to deny many of our feelings, and in doing so, we lie to ourselves. We learn to lie from the people closest to us. Then we become alienated from our feelings, and that alienation seeps into our relationships and defines them. Joe H. added a little humor to his idea of feelings before he got into recovery. If you talk about feelings, you can't be macho. It goes back to the caveman days. Go kill your meal, bring it back, and throw it at your woman, and you're done. You didn't have to talk about your feelings. Today, as a father of 2 girls, Joe H. will be the first to tell you that trying to live this way was killing him and his relationships. Even after 5 years sober, he knows he's still learning how to express what he's really feeling. From day 1. As soon as we are born, it starts. Baby boys, identified by their cute little blue blanket, are held less, soothed less, handled a little more roughly. Pay attention and you'll see 6-year-old boys who are well on their way to learning the rules of masculinity. That's heartbreaking. One, a 43-year-old sales and marketing consultant with 18 years of long-term recovery, remembers vividly how he responded to his parents' divorce as a young boy. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I remember very clearly a conversation that I had with God and saying, I will never let anybody fucking hurt me again. I remember creating a wall. I was 8 years old at the time, and I remember that tape playing as the years went on. I remember a girlfriend calling me the Iceman because I would shut down my emotions. That plagued me for years. Young boys everywhere are having experiences like this. The young boy left to comfort himself as his parent coldly walks away from him, telling him to be a big boy. The boy who learns that being tough means using force to get what he wants. The young man who thinks he shouldn't hug dad anymore, and as a result comes to see his body only as a sexual object. These are just some of the messages we hear as we grow up. Rejecting how we feel and teasing or shaming others for how they feel become part of who we are without our realizing it. Nothing more than feelings. Most of us are taught from a very young age to focus on our thoughts and ignore our feelings. As men in recovery, this is something we cannot afford to do if we value our sobriety. At the beginning of my recovery, I learned from my sponsor that addiction is a feelings disease, said Joe P., who has 20 years of long-term recovery and is the executive director of a treatment center for individuals with co-occurring disorders. As soon as we begin recovery, we are expected to learn how to be more open and honest about how we are feeling. Many men come into meetings scared to death, even though they're often unaware of how afraid they are. Rob, a 27-year-old financial advisor with 5 years of sobriety, commented on this. Being a man in the 12-step program means that I have to be able to identify and reveal my feelings and secrets to other men. In our culture, men are often expected to keep their emotions and difficulties to themselves. Not only is the program itself challenging, but developing deeply emotional relationships adds to it. Discovering our feelings in sobriety is an amazing process. Many men who are more sensitive have spent their lives feeling ashamed for having feelings and being teased, punished, and abused for showing them, first by others, then by themselves. Peter, a 57-year-old IT consultant with 10 years of long-term recovery, said, I spent an entire lifetime one way or another abusing some aspect of my behavior or my personality to avoid feeling. The only goal of my life was to not feel the way I did. Anything was better than feeling. You may have felt this way too. Is it any surprise, after years of keeping all of those feelings to ourselves and judging ourselves for having them, we would do everything in our power to avoid them? We may have a difficult time admitting that we feel experiences in our lives deeply. Given how most of us were raised, this doesn't seem to be a positive quality for men. Feelings seem to be the domain of women. At least, that's the idea society has reinforced for almost 2 centuries now. At most, we allow ourselves only certain emotions. Paul, a 50-year-old service professional and union steward with 24 years of long-term recovery, said, "Before sobriety, I used to think I had only 2 feelings, anger and depression. Now I can really experience life and all of the emotions that go with it." Joe, a 59-year-old pastor of a church for people in recovery, has 14 years of long-term recovery. He talked about this issue at length. Never let anyone know the real you. Never trust anyone to know what you are feeling unless it's a positive or a real masculine type of feeling, such as, "I've got control or power over this. This isn't going to get me down. I'll never run away," and so on. I can share those kinds of feelings easily. If I've got my shit together, then it's all good. But when I'm falling apart, or when I'm really feeling vulnerable, afraid, or I don't have it under control, I could never share that. What freedom you gain when you realize that being an emotional and sensitive man has nothing to do with your masculinity. Being sensitive is like having brown hair, brown eyes, or being 6 feet tall. You are not better or worse than anyone else. You are not any less of a man. Dan J., a 38-year-old architect with 5 years in sobriety, speaks to this issue poignantly. "I am a sensitive person. I feel things very strongly. I think the most important thing I have learned from my recovery is that it's okay for me to feel this way. I don't have to be tough to be a man. I can show my true feelings and still be okay. At the same time, I do not have to wear my emotions on my sleeve. Not everything I feel is real." Learning how to feel safe enough to experience our feelings and not to judge ourselves takes time. For some of us, the discovery of our feelings grows out of finally finding a safe and supportive environment to learn emotional awareness and how to talk about how we feel. Feelings aren't facts. Becoming aware of our feelings and developing the language to communicate them does present a danger of sorts. We can begin to worship or get stuck in our feelings. When Dan J. said, "Not everything I feel is real," he was referring to the way our feelings can dramatically affect our perception of reality. Feelings are neither good nor bad. They simply are what they are. Emotions. We learn in recovery that we are very accustomed to letting our emotions define our perception of the world. Even though we are mostly unaware of them, our feelings affect almost everything we do. Sadly, our alienation from our feelings causes other problems. Most of us have long struggled with our emotional awareness and how to acknowledge exactly what we are feeling without recognizing this. This struggle takes an immense toll on our health, relationships, and quality of life. Before recovery, we kept our feelings to ourselves, and we ended up believing that only we felt such intense fear, inadequacy, and loneliness. We let those feelings control our behavior despite having no awareness of what was happening to us. While we spent a lot of our time trying to control our emotions, in the end they controlled us. We hurt many people because we rejected core parts of who we were. We did not know how to take care of ourselves and meet our own needs. Whether we were acting out in anger or isolating ourselves in depression, we found ourselves caught in a vicious cycle. Because we felt unsafe and fearful, we responded with anger and control. As a result, we frightened, hurt, and alienated those who cared about us. When we went to them looking for help and safety, They did not feel safe and were not able to comfort or help us. Not understanding the reasons for their response, we felt rejected and alone, and we acted out again. And the cycle continued. You can become lost in the discovery of your feelings and think that everything you do is related to how you feel. Once you are sober and working the steps, you may find yourself flipping from one extreme to the other, from shut down and confused to an intense and uncontrolled expression of emotion. Sometimes in recovery, we let our feelings run our lives by using the excuse that we are addicts or sensitive or emotional, when in fact we've experienced an inability to process our feelings. We've believed for years that feelings are bad and we are bad or weak for having them. As a result, we often simply don't know what we are feeling and spend much of our time reacting to life. Remember this: you are 100% responsible for how you respond to the events in your life. Yes, it's important that you allow yourself to feel, but don't let those feelings define how you live your life. Your emotional sensitivity is not an excuse for bad behavior. I spent the first 4 years of my relationship with my partner unable to tell her when my feelings were hurt, which, as a sensitive and somewhat immature man, was quite often. Instead, I would feel hurt, take her actions personally, ascribe negative motives to them, feel alienated and shut off from her, and then turn my hurt into anger that I took out on her. Or I would simply shut down and isolate in the basement. I responded similarly to much of my shame, fear, sadness, insecurity, and other feelings that I did not think I could express to her because they were not manly. Then, when I looked for a safe place to share how I was feeling, it was not to be found. I felt abandoned and unloved. Joe talked about this. It's been a long-term process in therapy and in the 12-step program to discover how to get over my fear of intimacy and to share how I'm really feeling. I was in the program for a long time before I really came to grips with that, through divorces and failed relationships. I was sober, but I was still very hesitant and reluctant to share who I was. Charlie, a 45-year-old bus driver with 23 years of long-term recovery, talked about how he has learned to deal with his feelings. I used to be a slave to my ever-changing emotions. Recovery has allowed me to stop running, to feel my feelings, and to learn that I've created them through my thoughts and choices. I lived as a victim to emotions and to the mental tapes that created them. Now my feelings are beloved guides that reveal my thinking and remind me I can choose again. When you realize that consciously experiencing all of your feelings is okay, your life as a man will change because you will be able to be honest with yourself about what you are really feeling. Try not to force this process. Like everything in your recovery, let it happen. As the old AA saying goes, don't worry about getting in touch with your emotions. They will get in touch with you. Trust the process. Let others give you their support. Let the wise elders of recovery guide you. Share your feelings in meetings. Talk about them with your sponsor. Then share them with the important people in your life in a spirit of intimacy, not in manipulation, blame, or an attempt to get someone to take care of you. If what you're feeling is really intense, it's especially advisable to give yourself some breathing room before you unload on someone and say something you might regret. Take some time to cool down. Talk to a neutral party to get some perspective. Then, once you've sorted out what you're really reacting to, share your feelings with the relevant people. Emotional sobriety. Eventually, you will realize that your recovery is limited unless it includes emotional sobriety. You are emotionally sober when you are aware of how you are feeling, able to express your feelings, able to be responsible for your feelings, able to respond and not overreact to those feelings, and to let them go. I have spoken to many men who, long into recovery, still feel hopeless about ever being able to truly feel good about themselves and their lives.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?